What's happening, all you beautiful people? Welcome to a special edition episode of The Strange Road. We're out here at the Friends of the Serpent Mound Summer Solstice event. I'm your host, Mikey. This is Bub. As always,
hello.
Stoner and Disbro back in the tent, the Master Control tent, everybody. And we actually have some hitchhikers here. Some folks have come out to, check out presentations. We have Cameron, Liz, Born Not to Run's here, live in action.
That's so
We've
wild.
only conversed with him in the YouTube chat and shouted him out there, so we're shouting you guys out live. Mike Downard also is here. He's been watching our show for a few months now. We've been connecting over Facebook, so if anybody is here, and we appreciate your support, and anybody else that's here, thank you for being here as well.
Yeah. If you're not familiar with us, check out some of our stuff. You might find something you're actually interested in. We cover pretty much anything strange, right? So
yep,
it's not just this or that or one subject or the other. So
all things strange.
We cover a lot of topics and try to have a broad interest.
Yes, and UFOs and ancient civilizations is one of our most largest interests, I would say, for sure. And this talk today, this conversation today, I can go ahead and get started in intro. Jeffery Wilson, everybody, president of Friends of Serpent Mound. And, I also want to thank all the members of Friends of Serpent Mound, Delsey Wilson and her mother, Beverly McKenzie. Thank you to them so much for organizing this. It's an amazing event. We're having a ball. Without further ado, Jeffery, how are you?
Great. How about you?
Oh man, we're doing great. This is awesome. We've been super pumped. We're gonna dive into the Serpent Mound Crop Circle today, and we're stoked.
Okay. Well, the picture that we see on the screen up there is actually how I found out about this crop circle. My now wife, Delsey, was married to somebody else at the time, and her and her mother were driving on the road just past the entrance to Serpent Mound, and they saw this in the field. And Delsey recognized that as being a crop circle, so she got onto the internet and she started searching to try to find somebody that would come out and, be interested in it. Somebody she could report it to. Somebody somebody needed to know about it. And at the time, I had gotten out of college about 3 years or so. I had been teaching physics and astronomy, and throughout the entirety of my collegiate days, I was doing research on crop circles as a side project. I'd been out to go and visit a number of crop circles in Ohio and Indiana and Michigan, and trying to document them from a scientific point of view. We would measure things from, what kind of radiation was being emitted, what kind of changes there were to the electromagnetic fields, what kind of changes there were to the plants, all that kind of stuff, which I'll talk a little bit about as we go through this. But I thought I had been writing and reporting on other crop circles, and she found some of my writing and said, okay, I'm going to contact this guy. And so she sent me an email. I looked at the email. She just had a description. I said, any chance you can send me a picture? So she went back out to the field and took this picture, sent it to me, and I said, okay, I'll be down with a team. And so we got quite a few people from several states that are interested in crop circles. We had a loose kind of connection of group of people, and we came down to investigate this. She arranged the permission from the landowner, a lady by the name of Molly Williams, who still lives in the house where the spring is on the other side of Brush Creek from Serpent Mound. That's the lady that owns this field, and she arranged for the permission. We were the only ones allowed permission to go into the field. And so we did our best to try and document as much of it as we possibly could in the one day that we had to go and look at it. And so some of what you're going to see here is, what we saw. But that's where this photo came from, and that's my introduction to it.
So when it was made or when it was discovered, does anybody know it was the day after or 2 days after, or the time in between the actual formation, and how long before somebody noticed it? Because
well, our best guess is that it must have happened the evening before, because there had been nobody that had reported seeing it before that, and there were some heavy electrical thunderstorms that had come through and had knocked out power to 3 different power companies in the area. And we think that that happened during that period of time. There was a lot of rain that came from that. In fact, on the edge of the field, on closest to where you are, the water had come up out of the banks of Brush Creek and had gone into the field and left mud on the edge of the field. And so, if there was some, we would have seen, those kinds of tracks.
Yeah.
And so, let me flip.
So that's a good storm that actually came through, though. I mean, it was fairly significant.
Right. So this picture that you're seeing here was taken by one of our investigators. He was the first one to arrive, his T.C. Robertson. And he took this photo looking at the central portion of the crop circle. He was so excited when he arrived that he just ran straight across the field, right into the middle of it, which is not what we tend to do. We try not to damage the farmers' fields. We will walk out to the edge and walk up one of the sprayer lines where they leave marks in the field where they spray pesticides on the field. Try not to damage anything, try not to leave any marks. And so he unfortunately did that, but we can identify his track across the field on the aerial photograph. We know where that was made from. So here you can see, though, this is a field of soybeans. And if you're not familiar with soybeans, they're kind of like a vine type of plant. They have all kinds of branches that come off the main stem. They're not like a stalk of wheat or a stalk of corn. Those are grass type plants. Soybeans are different, and up to this point, there were actually very, very few soybean crop circles ever reported. And so we didn't really know what to expect. None of us had ever been in a soybean crop circle before. I've been in many wheat fields and cornfield ones. And like I said, there have been only a couple of reports of any even found. So we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what to look for. We didn't know what to try to find. And so it was quite a learning curve. But what you see here is that although the stalks of the plants have flattened in the field, the branches of the plants are still sticking up. So it's not like what you might see on, the History Channel or something like that on a documentary about crop circles, where some guy with a board is stomping the plants down.
Yeah.
Those plants are not stomped down here. You can see that. They're sticking up above the ground, probably about 1.5 to 2 feet. And so there is no mechanical damage here that we found. This is not your typical hoaxer-generated crop circle, which does happen. But this is one that just from looking at that, we were, wow, this is really something different.
What's the most common field to have a crop circle? Corn? Wheat?
Wheat is number 1, corn 2, or grass 2, and then corn 3.
Okay.
I in other presentations, I usually break it out in a big pie chart and go through all those.
Soybean
statistics.
is almost unheard of.
Yes. Yeah, it's very rare.
That's interesting. That's kind of contextually just spatially close to.
And within a month of this one, we had visited 2 more. One here in Adams County, another one in Adams County, and one up in Ross County. So we ended up going to 3 different soybean ones within about a month and a half. So.
That's great. Wait a minute. So do you think they're all connected because it is the same kind of field? I mean, and it obviously like with the frequency and.
Well, they are connected in more ways than one, but that's a really in-depth question that'll take a long time to answer. You might want to save that for your anniversary special.
Yes.
Because literally, I could do 2 hours on that topic.
Okay.
All right.
All right. I'll keep that one bottled up for the next time we get Jeff in studio. I'm gonna have to go.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
One we've certainly asked.
Okay.
And tried to answer.
I love it.
Mysterious. All right, you want to go up? Keep going.
Sure.
All right,
sure.
So far we've only looked at photos that were taken from the ground, but obviously the first thing we try to do is we try to get an aerial photo. Now, back in 2003, there were no drones like Mr. Drone Ohio here. so we would get up in a plane and we would fly over it. Now, that can get expensive. That can be challenging to do in a rural areas to find somebody with a plane that'll take you up. So we did find somebody locally that could fly a plane that could take us up. Unfortunately, it was a 2-seater plane, and actually one of the seats wasn't installed. And so he had some sort of plastic platform or something in the plane. And so actually my partner in crime, Roger Sugden, got the chance to fly, and he took my camera with him. So I got photos with my camera. He got photos with his camera, but he took the photos. And so here is what the famous photo that you're talking about.
Incredible.
Okay.
That's beautiful.
Now there's this whole series or a sequence of photos as he flew past the field, but I like this one for a number of reasons. But you can see Ted Robertson's, line coming across the field from the road.
Oh my God, look at that.
Okay, now there's a second line that you'll see kind of off, on the far right that goes between pathways.
Little zigzag.
That is my pathway because I walked down along the edge of the field and came up one of the sprayer lines. And as I was coming up, I thought, I'm going to miss this thing. I'm going to totally miss this. And so I cut across and got to another sprayer line to walk into the crop circle, not knowing that the rest of that was out in the field. Couldn't tell that it was out there. This whole entire thing is a couple hundred feet across. So it's not, and the soybeans were about chest high.
Wow.
Pretty high. Soybeans don't usually grow that high. I subsequently found out, usually they, maybe go about waist high, but these were really tall.
Yeah.
And the farmer said it was the best crop of soybeans he'd ever had. He was so ticked. And then this thing came down in this field.
They came down and wrecked his soybean crop.
Wrecked his soybean
So when
crop.
you went into it, like I think you mentioned maybe in another conversation, there were no footprints that you saw.
No.
There was no obvious
Nope. No
human
signs of
involvement.
mechanical damage, no signs of... There is actually another pathway which is barely perceptible just to the side of Ted's... Ted Robertson's pathway.
There,
It's very faint, and that was made by the farmer. After
Okay.
Delsey identified this out there, one person walked out and got to that one circle out on the end,
Yeah.
and then walked back out. So
Wow.
we can account for all the pathways that we can see there. Now, if you're very eagle-eyed, you can see one specific feature of the formation that there are no pathways leading to it. Can you identify it?
the tiniest little circle below the
gonna
eye.
say-
That's
yeah,
right.
that
Yeah,
little
kind
one.
of almost in the center there, below that central large eye feature. That is, we measured it out. It's 18 feet to the closest pathway.
Wow.
So there was no pathway leading to it. We only figured out that was there after Roger got back with the aerial photos.
Oh, nobody could see it from the ground.
no, you
obviously,
couldn't see it
because it
from
was
the
so tall. Okay.
So we've heard stories of the sheriff were there. It was difficult to get inside. What did you guys, when you arrived on scene, when you were contacted by Delsey, which then you had never met?
Yep. So the first thing I said to her was, well, we aren't going to go out in the field unless we have permission from the landowner.
Yeah.
And so she arranged the permission with Molly Williams. Molly Williams granted us the permission to go there, but she said nobody else. And so, it was just our group that was allowed to go out there. The sheriff did come by many times. I think they ended up putting some police tape up along the side of the road to keep people out. Obviously, other people just went in outside of any observations. There was somebody that I think was reported waving a shotgun around. I think that might have been Molly Williams' son at one point, just trying to get people out of there.
Oh my God.
But,
Became a local tourist attraction?
well, yeah,
Or-
because the local paper then, after we arrived, the local paper then reported on it. And
Oh,
so
boom.
then there were a lot more people that wanted to come out and see it.
Oh, I bet.
How long was the formation there before the crops were taken down or harvested, or how long was this up and you could go see it and witness it? How long
I
was
would
it there?
say,
Month?
yeah, maybe a little longer than that. What you're seeing here is the field is green. From this vantage point, the way the light is reflecting off it, it looks kind of grayish.
Right.
Yeah.
Roger took photos from the other direction looking at it. from the Serpent Mound side, and all the field is this bright green. So it just depends on the way the light reflects off of it.
Right.
Sure.
So they have to wait until the field turns brown, leaves fall off, and then they can harvest it. So I would imagine it's usually around October, beginning October, mid-October.
Yeah.
That they'll, so it was probably around for about a good month or two.
That's so cool.
Wow.
It's such a crisp image too, and I mean it's such a crisp formation.
Yeah.
And like you said, the spot that's nearly 20 feet removed from any like accessible path inside that field, unless you're like a competitive long jumper on the weekend.
Or you dropped in from a helicopter.
Yeah, Black Op mission or something.
Tom cruised it, just dangled over the top, and
Right. All right. So this is a photo that I took a couple of weeks later. I had gone back home to Michigan. Roger went back home to Indiana. Ted went back home to Indiana. Everybody went back home after our investigation. And Delsey had gotten a report of another crop circle up in Ross County. And so we came down and visited that one. And that one was definitely man-made. In fact, it was incomplete. Somebody had probably tried to, we see this happen often. There are like these copycat crop circles. Once one gets reported in the paper, somebody's got to go out there and try to make one. So this one, somebody tried to go and make this giant, almost looks like a Mercedes-Benz symbol. And they just didn't quite make it in the field. So we drove all the way down here again. And within 10 or 12 minutes, we identified it was man-made. Well, I figure we're already down here. I'm going to get another pilot to take me up, and I'm going to go and fly and look at the crop circle at Serpent Mound again. Yeah. So I went up, got some pictures of Serpent Mound, got some pictures of the crop circle, and the pilot that took me up, a guy by the name of Dan Music, about a week or so later, was flying down Route 50 in the Paint Creek Valley near Bainbridge and spotted another crop circle. And if he hadn't flown me over this one and I explained to him what I was looking for, he would have never seen the crop circle.
Little synchronicity of like, here's your crash course. That's
right.
No
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Next time you're out flying, keep your eyes open.
Yep. And that's exactly what he did. And he spotted it and contacted me, and we came back down again. Same valley as the other one. And so, that was our start. So, this is a kind of an interesting picture for that reason. Also, in this photograph, I'll put up a little line here. The central axis of the crop circle actually points right to the head of Serpent Mound.
That's wild.
It goes right through the sort of triangular head of Serpent Mound, which is right up there on the top of that bluff. It's hard to see with the trees up there, but that's where it is.
Right.
I'll show you a couple more pictures here just to give you some sense of scale. So I like this picture. Wow. This was taken by Benita McLeese. Is she here? Benita McLeese lives across the street from Soaring Eagle Field.
Hello, Benita.
And she sent me these about, I want to say maybe 10 years ago. I didn't know that she had gone up and taken pictures, but she came to one of our events. I gave a talk about this crop circle, and she said, I've got pictures. I went up and got aerials. Wow. So she sent me this, and I liked this one because it has a car driving by, so you can see the sense of scale of how big that crop circle is versus that truck driving on the road there.
Wow.
And so I kind of like that one. And she's got the strut of the plane there in the photo.
That's so cool.
But one of the things that we try to do is we try to get really accurate aerial photographs of these. And so a guy that I knew who was part of our, sort of circle of people, a guy by the name of Chris Steele, had a friend who owned an aerial mapping company up in Columbus. And so they, for free, flew down and did orthographically rectified photograph of the crop circle and Serpent Mound together. And so this is perfectly, flat. And so that allowed us to understand exactly what that alignment was of the axis of that crop circle pointing right to Serpent Mound. I had a hunch that it did. And so I had taken GPS readings inside the crop circle and then GPS readings of Serpent Mound to try to figure out what that alignment was. But this certainly helped visualize it dramatically, for us to try to figure out what that was.
Yeah, I mean, it looks pretty dead on. I mean, that's what
At first, we thought it might be going through the tail, because from Serpent Mound, looking back at it, it was kind of deceptive. You could see it from the tail overlook, and you could just say, well, is that pointed to us or is it not pointed to us? It's pretty close, but really it is actually pointed at the head.
Right.
So.
Oh yeah, clearly. Look at that.
So it almost seems like it's almost like a compass. I mean, it's north, south, east, west inside that circle as well, right? Because the head of the serpent is true north, correct?
No. If you draw a line from the spiral tail through the head of the serpent, the notch in the back of the head.
That way it's north. Oh,
so
okay,
that's
I see.
north. So it's kind of like west-southwest.
Okay, I got you.
All right. Now, just to give you a sense of what the damage was done to the plants inside, the one on the left is a photograph of what the healthy soybean plants looked like in the rest of the field. Where the stalks attach to the main stem, that's called a leaf base. And that leaf base, you can see, is nice and green, and it's soft tissue. It's called parenchyma tissue. That's where all the new cells are being born to extend the stalk out, and so those are all intact. What we found in the flattened areas of the crop circle was what you see on the right, is where those leaf bases were. Those were cooked from the inside out.
Weird.
And you'll notice that there's like red discoloration on that stalk. The red discoloration is due to a change in a chemical inside the plant. When plants get under stress, like in the fall, when the cold weather happens, it turns your leaves different colors in the fall. Those plants start to produce a chemical called anthocyanin. And that's what turns the plant a different color. That's what's happening here. So whatever energy made this thing, it not only cooked the plant from the inside out, but it stressed the plant enough that it started producing that anthocyanin. And so that's what we see. We saw that throughout the whole thing. Now, there are about 8 to 10 leaf bases or stem attachments on every stalk of plant. We did a statistical study where we collected a ton of plants out in the rest of the field at different distances, and then we took plants from different sections of within the flattened areas, and we measured and documented the damage on the leaf bases. Almost all of the leaf bases on the plants that were flattened in the formation had this damage. We did not find a single damaged stem outside of the formation.
Wow. So it's almost been microwaved. It's like,
well, we don't know what kind of energy it is, but that's.
But wow,
and I'll show you a cross section of that so you can really see it.
Oh wow,
that's even crazier.
Right.
Okay, so again, the one on the left is the healthy one, and you can see soybeans have these little hairs on the outside of the plant. They're very delicate. The light inside area, and then there's a dark green core. That light inside area is the parenchyma tissue. And then you have the core where all the nutrients go back and forth in the plant to keep the plant healthy. What you see on the left is that parenchyma tissue been cooked from the inside, but not the hairs on the outside of the plant. None of those are damaged, and the core wasn't damaged. So that's why, even though the plants have been flattened, they just didn't die. They were still healthy and growing, but just now flat in that flattened state.
Weird.
Right.
Wow.
But they also like lay in the same direction a lot of times as well, right? Like
the
flow of the actual plant being laid down.
We did document the flow. I don't have a slide in here of that, but the flow changed direction in certain places within it. If I go back to...
So it's almost like they're directing the energy or
I'm wondering
whatever
the energy,
it is.
However that energy comes out, if it has like a toroidal field that's kicking out.
This is a little subtle to see, but
soybeans.
In that center of the eye...
You can see the line.
Okay, the eye is what's known as a vesica piscis, but in the center, that little same kind of shape, that's called a vesicula. In the vesicula, the flow in the vesicula was in opposite directions along the main axis.
Look at that.
So the plants are coming towards the camera, and then the other plants are going away from the camera. So that's why you see a change in color there.
Right.
But we saw the change in flow in several sections of the crop circle.
Okay.
And sometimes we withhold some of those details like that, where we see that, because if someone comes forward and says that they made this, then we say, okay, tell us how you made it, how you walked around, what's the flow, and then we say, that's not how it is, because you can see this flow change, right?
That's the
So we
gotcha.
kind of hold some of those details back, just for those kinds of things. But
Good investigator will do
I mean,
that.
to
Nice.
really, put it through the trials.
Yep.
all right, so
Gotcha.
I got a couple of graphs here. I know nobody likes these things,
Bub
but
loves graphs.
I love graphs, numbers, charts,
Okay.
any kind of analytics.
so
I enjoy
what we
them.
have here is we have measured for radiation inside the crop circle. And what you see here is that all of the yellow and orange dotted lines in there is the level of radiation that we measured outside the crop circle at different distances. There's always a level of background radiation that we're all exposed to every day coming from the sun. And so it fluctuates, generally speaking, but it's within a certain band. We know what that is. And that's what we're seeing with those yellow lines. The blue lines, the light blue and the dark blue lines, are the radiation that we measured inside the crop circle in different areas of the crop circle. So this is, not something that you're going to produce if you're walking around with a board or a garden roller. You're not going to generate this kind of radioactivity. The radioactivity that we have generally found inside crop circles lasts about, we've never measured radiation longer than 10 days after a crop circle has happened. It dissipates somewhat quickly, and it's not in any way like in some kind of danger level where you need a containment suit or anything like that. It's just, kind of, you can see they're slightly above the background, but statistically significant.
Now, is there any way that somebody could come up and say, well, no, even these spikes, or, just say this portion of the crop circle soaked up more radiation from the sun, and that's why it's there, Jeff? It's not anything any more significant. Could that be?
No, because we find alpha, beta, and gamma coming off of this stuff. And there have been a couple of hoaxer groups that have tried to go around and scatter some radioactive material in the crop circle.
That's great.
Do they know Doc Brown?
Stuff.
Are they getting, plutonium?
No, I think it's like some kind of radioactive
machine?
salts or something.
Yeah, wow.
Like radium.
But I've never seen it happen in the U.S. And it was done for one of these History Channel things or whatever.
of course.
Okay. I would say your average
what they're
weekend
trying to
hoaxer.
do, what these hoaxer groups are trying to do, especially for these documentaries, is they're trying to match the details that are being reported in these genuine ones.
Yeah.
And there are just some things that they just can't do. And then this, is one of those things.
But even to that, even if it took scattering some radioactive material to duplicate it and you got the flow correct, I don't know that many people that have. Maybe you could manufacture it. I don't want to know how. I want to Google it and have somebody knocking on my door tomorrow about, what have you been looking up? But, again, that's a level of hoax that I don't think people are going to. So
yeah,
adds more credence to the
there's other
unknown.
details here we'll get to here. So here's another chart. This is a real crazy chart. So all of the measurements on the 2/3 of the right-hand side are measurements that were taken within the crop circle. The measurements, the last couple there on the right side, are measurements that were taken outside of the crop circles at different distances. The last 3, 100 feet out, 200 feet out, 300 feet out. Okay. So what you see here are different kinds of measurements that we do. The dark blue is measuring the local magnetic field. The yellow there is measuring the electric field. We measure for radio and microwave emission. This particular crop circle is the only crop circle that we have ever gone into where we actually measured radio and microwave emission emitting out of the crop circle itself.
Wow.
We've done that test in dozens and dozens of other crop circles, never seen anything like it. We actually always kidded ourselves, this is just like a control test. We know that we're going to probably get something else in these other settings, but we never get anything on the radio microwave. And this time we did until we got out of the crop circle, and then it went back to back to zero. We don't have good explanations for why this might be the case, but we try to document what we can because we don't really know what the mechanism is, what the source cause of these crop circles are. So we're just trying to scattershot of a whole range of tests that we can, document whatever facts we can get.
Yeah.
So just as a kind of an overall thing, I know this is a ton of words. If anybody is interested in this kind of information, this comes from a report that I put out on www.iccra.org. That stands for the Independent Crop Circle Researchers Association, which I, served as the head of. And we documented all of the crop circles that have been reported in the United States going back into the 1800s. And so there are some specific reports more in depth that we've done. This is one of them. You can download this as a PDF. A lot of this material is in there, but this is really talking about the actual information and what statistical studies that were done of, the magnetic field study or the electric field study, or the radio microwave or the radiation. Every single test came back statistically positive, so it was, this is just sort of the fact sheet stuff. Now, this is all sort of the real heavy-duty science side of it. Once we get to a point where we can determine this is not made by people, okay? That's the whole reason for doing all this testing, is that we just want to determine, is this made by people or is it not made by people? And once we can get to the point where it's not made by people, then we can start doing some sort of higher order kind of analysis of it, because I don't want to waste my time trying to analyze some hoaxer's crop circle. So one of the things that I did when we did kind of a survey of the crop circle and got all its measurements and everything, try to make a map of it. A friend of mine, another crop circle researcher over in England by the name of Alan Brown, he's a kind of a crop circle geometer. He kind of studies the geometry of crop circles.
Okay.
And he and I spoke together at a conference in Arizona many, many years ago. And his presentation was about an analysis of crop circles in England that he had done over the course of a number of years. There were many crop circles in England in the late 80s, mid 80s to late 80s, and into the 90s that had a roughly similar pattern to them. They called it a Celtic cross pattern. Essentially 5 circles spread out like on a dice.
Right.
All right. And what Alan did was he measured the sizes of the circles and the distances of that they were away from each other. And sometimes they had big rings around them or whatever. Have you ever heard of the archaeologist Dr. Gerald Hawkins?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, Dr. Gerald
Can't say I have.
Hawkins wrote a couple of books in the early 1970s. His most famous book is called Stonehenge Decoded, in which he determined all of the astronomical alignments at Stonehenge and advocated that it was set up like an astronomical clock, to identify certain astronomical alignments. So that came from Dr. Gerald Hawkins.
Okay.
Now, he was a professor at Boston University, and in his later years, he got interested in studying crop circles. And he wrote a crop circle science paper in which he talked about, he had identified this really interesting sort of property of certain crop circles. If there were multiple circles in a group, he would measure out the sizes of each circle, and then he would take what he called the mother circle, whatever one was the biggest one, and he would divide in the diameters of the smaller ones into that, and he would get a ratio. And it turns out that those mathematic ratios, he said, in all the crop circles that he looked at, were a very specific kind of ratio called a diatonic ratio. Any musicians in here know what a diatonic ratio is? It's like the intervals on a piano, on a keyboard. It's interval from C to D, D to E, E to F, right? Okay, so he uncovered this idea that perhaps there is a mathematics involved in that, in the design of these circles that relate somehow to the same kind of intervals of frequencies in music. Well, Alan took that like one step further. what he found was that if you do those kinds of ratios, or you look at the distances away from the mother circle from these Celtic cross patterns, they solve a geometric puzzle that goes all the way back to the time of the Egyptians. From the time of the Egyptians up until Alan Brown started working on this, geometers had discovered 6 known ways of solving this geometric puzzle. The puzzle is known as squaring the circle, where you take a circle and you have to construct a square of equal area using just a compass and a straight edge from that. So you're trying to get the same area as the circle as the square. And what he found was that the circles in the crop circle defined the squaring of the circle.
Wow.
It didn't matter, the different sizes of the circles. It worked every time. He uncovered 52 new ways of solving the puzzle that nobody had known about before by studying these Celtic cross patterns in England. Well, because I had spoken at the same conference with him and we sort of, struck up a friendship, I said to him, hey, this crop circle in Ohio has a Celtic cross pattern in its design. I don't know if you noticed it, but here is the design, okay? So there is a central circle made up of those 2 crescents, right? And then the standing crescents, and then you have these 4 outer circles. And so what Alan found was that it solved the squaring of the circle in 2 new ways that he hadn't found previously.
What?
And they were better than 99.6% accurate.
Wow.
And so you have this would be on your far left, what he called his simple squared circle solution, in which you take that ratio out there, and then his other one, which is called the tangential squared circle solution. So you can see what the percentage of accuracy is between those. And so you have this sort of idea of understanding new kinds of knowledge that humans haven't figured out before, but it's being demonstrated in this geometry in this field. And so if you were to try to figure out that geometry and lay that out, Alan tried to figure out, here are all the necessary geometric points and circles that you need to construct that figure out in the field. And of course, they're not there, right? All those construction lines to get those points aren't there. So it's kind of a,
So if it was man-made, all of those lines or tracks would have had to be there to construct it.
Correct.
Jeez.
Yeah. And so that's not in there. And so, it's kind of one of those things. Wow, the mystery really deepens.
I was about to say that.
Unbelievable. I mean, I've always heard that
crazy.
crop circles, the geometric patterns represent sound. They represent frequency. It's like this woo-woo thing.
We'll get to that.
You know what I mean? I've heard this throughout the years of, and now we're realizing that a lot of sacred geometric patterns with the work of cymatics and sending sound through these plate sand. I don't know if you guys have ever looked that stuff up. It's really, really fascinating. But there's patterns of crop circles that will pop up in those 432 frequencies and all those octaves. So that's wild.
I've got an arrow there pointing to that circle is 18 feet away from any line, any construction line.
Right.
So that's just out there. Now, a little more on the geometric analysis.
Oh boy,
so
here we go.
Ted Robertson looked at the geometry of this, and he figured out that actually the design of it is based on a geometric design known as the flower of life. Or it's really the seed of life that creates the flower of life geometry. So that's what this geometry is based upon. And that in that sort of in the center vesica Pisces and the vesicula, those actually incorporate higher mathematics. So square root of 2, square root of 3, square root of 5. That's how you construct those features. And so there's a bit of math involved in trying to figure out that stuff. But that's what is incorporated in that geometry. So it's not as simple as it looks in the field, it's actually very geometrically complex when you really start to figure out, well, how would you go about how would you go about putting this together? Well, it's based on this, and it's based on this, and it's based on this, and it gets really complicated.
Let me just let you know, I've tried to make the seed of life and the flower of life in Photoshop.
Yeah.
It was very, very difficult.
Yeah.
I had to get essentially like my repeatable pattern and then anchor that pattern so the circles would fall in line. So you kind of had to program it a little bit. And it's just like, it's so hard to even do it in Photoshop.
Right.
So let alone in a
You're
field.
not doing this in the cover of darkness in a soybean field with a board
During a rainstorm.
and your buddy and saying, "Hold my beer, I gotta go." Make this crop circle.
During a rainstorm. So getting back to the diatonic ratios. All right. So
That's wild.
we decided to do that diatonic ratio analysis for this crop circle here at Serpent Mound. And also there was one the following year in the closest farm field to the Miamisburg Mound. Gary Argabright, if you were here, mentioned the Miamisburg Mound. The closest field to that mound in the summer of 2004 in a cornfield had this a very similar design crop circle in it. And so we measured that one out, and we had a couple of our members, D. Gregg, mechanical engineer down in Texas, he calculated out the diatonic ratios. And then Ted Robertson, who makes harpsichords for a living, is going to play them for you here. So what you've done is we were able to figure out all of the different diatonic ratios within the design. You can see he's got it plotted out for the Miamisburg crop circle up there. So when you try to figure out what those diatonic ratios are, where are the notes that are up there? Now, what's interesting about the two crop circles is that the Miamisburg one is the first crop circle that anybody's ever found that had a non-diatonic ratio involved in it, one of the sharp keys on the piano keyboard. So it's got a little bluesy effect when you play it. And so you have, just the straight, note set, and then you have this one that's got this other odd key out there. So it's kind of interesting. And to hear him play it on a harpsichord, it's kind of weird too. So, but all right. So, of course, this was, in a farm field across the street from Serpent Mound. Now, I'd actually visited Serpent Mound twice before. The first time I went to Serpent Mound was in 1996, and the second time was 2 years later, I think in 98. And the second time I came down, I was on spring break, and we were traveling around to visit a bunch of mound sites. And the person I was with, when we got down into the valley, as you descend, coming down Ohio State Route 73 from Hillsboro, you descend down into the crater. When you got down into the crater, that's where that farm field is. And then you hit Brush Creek, and then you hit the entrance to Serpent Mound. By that point in time, in 2003, I've been personally investigating crop circles in the fields since 96. I've been researching them since 88. And so I knew quite a bit about them. And I knew that crop circles don't appear anywhere or everywhere in the landscape. They only appear where there are certain contextual features around. One of them is that they usually appear near some kind of body of water, a creek, a pond, a drainage ditch. In this circumstance, it's right next to Brush Creek, and on the other side of the field is a spring that you can go and get water from today. And so it's between these bodies of water. Another feature is that they appear at the downslope or the very lowest part of a field. They don't generally appear on the tops of hills or near the tops of hills. They're usually in the lowest part of the area, which obviously this field is. It's right down there in the floodplain. The third thing is that we found, and all of these things are in like 95% of all the cases. The third one is that they appear near power lines. And we're not sure exactly why that's the case, but there is a power line that runs along 73 on the opposite side of the road. And in 85% of the cases, the closest power line pole to the crop circle usually has a transformer box on it. Don't really understand why that's the case. Not all power line poles have that, but that's in the overwhelming majority of the cases we see that. The fourth big correlation is that in 65% of the crop circles that we've seen in the United States, they're coming down in very close proximity to ancient mounds and earthworks. And that's where I got involved. I had an interest in Serpent Mound before this because I used to teach physics and astronomy. I was interested in the archaeoastronomy of Serpent Mound. But when I drove down into that valley, I said to the person I was with, boy, this would be the best location for a crop circle to happen. It has all of these things around there. And 8 years later, that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
Wait. You almost kind of like Babe Ruthed it? Yeah. Right here would be a great spot for a crop circle.
The specific field, too.
Wilson.
I said, that's the field right there. That's got all the things around it. And
it's always by water.
So I was a little surprised when, I get this email from Delsey, and then I talked to her on the phone, and she says, yeah, it's in a field near Serpent Mound. And I was thinking to myself, really? Which one? Which one is that in? And it turned out to be the one that I had picked, back in '98.
Yeah. So you said in Ohio, 65% of crop circles are located near mounds or some other feature that you've kind of built this schematic list for. Is that true?
And in a couple of cases, this is an interesting story. So one of the crop circles, the first one that Ted Robertson went to, T.C. Robertson went to, in Indiana, was in a cornfield kind of in south central Indiana. And I kept bugging him. I said, look, we know this correlation exists. What is in that area that might be near there?
What's the
and
magnet?
He's like, there's nothing around. I said, find out from the historical, societies, call the archaeology departments, find out, because there's something there. Nope. 3 years after that crop circle happened, Indiana University excavated a mound, circular enclosure right near where that crop circle was. The crop circle knew it was there, but the archaeologists hadn't found it yet.
Wild question. Do you think some of the mound structures are a correlation to old crop circles?
That is
like
a very interesting question.
Good question.
One of the first people to ask that question is the guy that wrote the very first book about crop circles, Dr. George Terence Meaden over in England. He was an atmospheric physicist. He wrote the very first book about crop circles called The Circles Effect and Its Mysteries in early 1988. It came out. And he was a meteorologist, atmospheric physicist, and he ran a group called Tornado Research Organization over there. He was tracking tornadoes and stuff like that. And so when circles started coming down in England, he's thinking, oh, this is really strange whirlwind kind of stuff. And so that's how he got involved in investigating them. And then he wrote this whole book about everything that he was finding. Well, after he kind of spent 10 years researching crop circles as a sort of this side thing that he was doing with this weather stuff, because he had been going to so many of them in the ancient landscape in England. They're coming down near places like Stonehenge, Avebury, Silbury Hill, all these ancient sites. He decided to go. Now, he was probably in his 50s then. He went back to Oxford University, got his degree in archaeology, and he had this theory that the crop circles were happening and then ancient peoples were coming in there and memorializing them.
Wow.
Now, a German researcher friend of mine, his name is Andreas Muller. He went to Africa to research crop circles in Africa. He went to visit with this medicine man down in Africa. There had been reports of crop circles there for a long time. And the practice there was if a crop circle was reported in some village, they would send for this medicine man to come and interpret it for them.
Oh.
But it might take a few weeks. It might take a couple months, and so, to send out for him and him to make his way there. So what they would do is they would go around the size of the circle and pound in wooden poles to memorialize it. So, if something happened to it in the meantime, they would have the record of it. And so he documented that, practice in Africa. So it's entirely possible that many of these ancient sites could be in some way, shape, or form related to something similar like that.
Is that how the Woodhenge started? You know,
be.
something like
Don't know.
that.
Yeah.
The one, I mean, we visited Cahokia last year, and this, I mean, we've been there a couple times. It's so big, we had never seen the woodhenge.
Yep.
It's magnificent, and there's one here as well in Serpent Mound.
Serpent Mound
you
has
know,
a
kind of
woodhenge, right? And so
Wow.
this is just, you know, my interest in that was identifying all these different astronomical alignments at Serpent Mound. All these yellow lines are all of the solar alignments for the solstices and the equinoxes. All the blue lines are all the lunar alignments, northernmost moonrise to southernmost moonrise, midpoint rise. When I first started doing archaeoastronomy at Serpent Mound, the first thing I wanted to do was confirm the summer solstice alignment through the oval, because that's the most famous one. And the first time I did that was in 2004. And it was during that sunset that I then noticed that after the sun had set, Venus was right there setting at the same time within probably 25 minutes. And so then it dawned on me, well, actually, every place that you would see a solar alignment, you can actually see planetary alignments in every single one of those, because all the visible planets travel around the sun and they follow the same path across the sky that the sun does. And so where the sun rises and sets and all of these dates, you'll see the planets rise and set in those same places. So you'll see Mercury. In fact, when I went to a computer astronomy program to kind of identify that setting alignment, Mercury was between Venus and the horizon after the sun had set. So Mercury set, then Venus set, then Saturn set. And interestingly enough, in the opposite direction of that summer solstice sunset alignment, the full moon was rising in the opposite direction, which happens from time to time. And so I think the astronomical alignments are much more complicated. It's just a matter of documenting them all. And so from 2004 until, you know, today, we've found a few additional ones along the way that hadn't been previously reported. Most of these were documented in a very short period of time between 1986 and 1989. And the people who documented them is the subject of my talk for tomorrow evening.
There you
is
go.
All about the solstice alignments at Serpent Mound.
Now, real quick, Jeff, I know a lot of folks at Serpent Mound and some of they're starting to say that all the signs that are talk about the alignments, they're getting rid of them. The alignments aren't real. So they don't agree. But here we are looking at all these. I mean, what are we to believe? I'm so confused by that.
Well,
there's clearly alignments.
Let me go back to the solar one so you can kind of see the solar alignments here.
Yeah, a simple one.
So that first summer solstice sunset alignment through the oval, which is what everybody came and watched on Wednesday, on the day of the solstice, that was discovered by two dowsers. That really irritates the scientific people over at the OHC. And they don't like to acknowledge that that discovery was made by husband and wife team Clark and Marjorie Hardiman. The next three solar alignments, the summer solstice sunrise, the equinox sunrise, and the winter solstice sunrise, those were discovered by two amateur archaeologists. They were not professionals. And so you're starting to see a pattern here. All of the lunar alignments were discovered by Bill Romaine, who also discovered the true north line, which allowed the two amateurs to calculate out the solstice sunrises. It's a little more complicated than that, but essentially Romaine was not affiliated with a university or a museum program or anything like that. He's an independent archaeologist, although he is trained. He's got his PhD in archaeoastronomy. So what you have is a group of non-affiliated archaeo enthusiasts that are making these discoveries. So over time, what has happened is the people at the OHC initially only endorsed the sunrise alignments because later on, those two amateurs then worked with Dr. Brad Lepper from the OHC in doing the excavation of the central coil where they got the so-called Fort Ancient date. So they worked with him. And so the OHC endorsed those sunrise alignments, but not, and and informally endorsed that the summer solstice sunset was there by allowing people to come out and view it. But they never really endorsed anything. If you go over there, there is a sign that only shows those 4 alignments still to this day. But recently, about 2 years ago, Dr. Brad Lepper and the chief of the Shawnee, Chief Ben Barnes, wrote a short paper in which they declared that there are no archaeoastronomy alignments at Serpent Mound at all. They don't exist, period, end of story. And to me, I just say, well, you can believe what they say, or you can just go out there and watch them, because that's exactly what we've been documenting for 30
the proof's
years.
There.
Yeah, and
Right.
so if anybody's interested in that, you can go out onto YouTube. I've done time-lapse videos of standing there and watching the sun in the alignment. And so, and I've, for the last 4 years, documented all of them repeatedly by flying drones over. And so whether it's on the ground or in the air or on a computer or calculating it, the alignments are there. The alignments are there. The alignments are there. The alignments are there. And then you got 2 guys that say, no, there's nothing there. Move on. There's nothing to see here. So, I
Can't
just
close the curtain. Sorry.
I just go with the evidence. I go with what the data says. You've heard that repeatedly over, with all of the speakers today, is just follow where the evidence takes you.
Absolutely.
So I just threw in this because people may have this question. Where is Serpent Mound? Inside the Meteor Crater. It's way there on the southwest corner. There's the Meteor Crater. I put together this LiDAR map of the crater that shows the relief of the crater itself, because there's this thing out there about, the crop circle is there because of the Meteor Crater. Well, we don't really know any
Right.
correlation with that. The Meteor Crater happened 200 million years ago.
Right.
Now, it did fracture the rock in a lot of places. And let me see if you can see this in color. You can see the relief in color, white being the highest points, green being the lowest points. So the crop circle happened on the southwest side down there by Serpent Mound in one of those really dark green low areas. And so there is a bunch of faults in the crater. If I go forward here. So this map on the left is a map that was made by some guys from the Ohio Division of Geological Survey. They went through and measured the electromagnetic field changes in the crater itself. So Serpent Mound sits in between 2 magnetic field highs in the crater. There is a magnetic field low in the crater on the opposite side, way over about 4 miles that way. There's also a group that came in and studied that there were gravitational anomalies in the crater. That's what the map on the right is. And so what I did was I took those 2 maps and I plotted them out on the crater so that you can see where those different anomalies are within the crater. So here's our crater again. You can see where Serpent Mound is. The crop circle is right near where Serpent Mound is. And so let's see. All right, so the orange and yellow are the magnetic field highs. The blues are the lows. I'm sorry, those are gravitational anomalies. The black lines in there, which are hard to read, are all the fault lines. And so you can see all of that stuff in there, and I guess it's both. The blue is the gravity. I think the yellow and red is the electromagnetic field.
What do you mean gravity anomalies? There's higher levels of gravity, less
gravity?
gravity?
When the meteorite or comet, we don't know which, impacted, it fractured the rock, and it created different densities in the rock, which then correlates to a different level of gravity in the area that can be measured with a gravitometer. And that's what those guys did at Ohio Department of Geology. Wow. So the really high anomaly there where Serpent Mound is, it's on the edge of it, but the crop circle definitely is in it. Did that play a role? Did it not play a role? We don't know for sure.
Yeah.
But that is the correlation that I've reported on and some people have taken that and they've run with that and made all kinds of claims based on that.
Yeah.
We don't really know, but that's the correlation.
Wow.
And as they always say, correlation doesn't equal causation, right?
Yeah.
So,
Fair point.
yeah.
How are we doing on time, Jeff?
Good. I think there's just 2 slides left.
Okay, cool.
So we have, I had mentioned this story to you, so I figured I would throw this picture in here.
Yeah.
All right. So as we were all exiting the crop circle after we were in there all day long investigating it, we had been taking GPS readings in the crop circle. You see the GPS there in the foreground. That's being held by T.C. Robertson. You can see Delsey there, Delsey's late father in the background. And then the guy with his arm kind of out there with the pipe, that's Roger Sugden. Roger Sugden is kind of amused there, like, what is going on? Because he's got a pair of binoculars that have a digital camera built into it. And it got hot in his hands. And he's like, what is going on there? And so he literally ripped the batteries out of it because the batteries were overheating and going to fry the electronics. At the same time, Ted was observing that the electronics on the Garmin began to glow, and it fried the electronics in the Garmin, and he took the picture of that happening.
Wow.
Is this a particularly hot day? What time of day is this?
This is about 9 o'clock at night. So in the evening.
So it was noticeable too. So it's dark enough out now that all this
just,
happening.
He says, started glowing like, when you used to turn off an old tube TV and in the dark it would glow a little bit. He said that was the glow coming from it, and just fried the electronics
Picking
out.
up that energy source from somewhere and getting into those devices.
Now, I mentioned that the following crop circle that we went to up in Ross County, I had the same thing happen in that crop circle, and Ted took a picture of me with a puzzled look on my face, holding my Garmin with it glowing in my hand, and it fried the electronics in that. Different Garmin, I had two of them.
No, I mean kaput after this?
Yeah. Totally kaput.
Yeah, that's wild. And we have heard stories from Tom about camera crews and car batteries just in the crater without the crop circle getting fried and losing power and so forth. So
the last little bit here is you would think that these things are they're almost like a one-off, right? This happened in a field, we documented it, great, we're good to go, on to the next one. Well, the following year in the spring, we decided to hold a conference to talk about all the crop circle stuff that we were doing. So we held it in the crater over at Woodland Altars on the other side of the crater. People came in from all kinds of states around the country. And at the end of the conference, we took people over to this field where the crop circle had happened. Now, the field had been harvested the prior year. Now here in the springtime, the crops they haven't planted them. They haven't tilled the field yet. They haven't planted anything. And this is what we found.
Oh, look at that.
So what had happened was that the plants that were in the field, there were these tiny little purple and green flowers that would grow up. The very first vegetation that grew up in the spring, they grew up in the shape of the formation. And the plants were growing faster and were healthier than the surrounding plants in the rest of the field.
It looks like the negative image of it. Like everything that was laid down is green.
Right, yeah.
And everything that was upright is brown.
The pathway coming into it.
Yep. You see the pathway too.
Is that from when this is, or is that from the residual?
That's from whatever this residual is.
The pathway too.
The pathway too, yeah.
Because somebody walked
now that's
back
interesting.
Yeah.
From probably
being in there.
had the energy on their shoes. Or
that's
we
what
don't
I'm
really
wondering.
know.
Yeah,
These
right.
echo effects are very rare. I've only been able to document about a dozen of them around the world. It happened here, and it happened at the one in Ross County that we went to just a couple weeks later. Outside of that, there really hasn't been maybe one or two other documented in the United States, just a handful over in Europe, just 2 or 3. So it's a really rare thing to see this.
Of the ones studied like that or noted like that, is there any correlation of the readings being higher in those?
Almost nobody does the kind of work that our team does. In fact, I would venture to say that there is no other team doing the kind of work that we're doing on these crop circles that we had been doing here in the United States. Most of the people that are looking at crop circles are more enthusiasts that, or I hate to say this word, but like crop circle tourists. They go out there, they go look around. This is cool. I want the vibe. I want to feel what it's like. They're not really documenting it like we are to try to understand what is making them, what's the source cause of them, what is that.
They're kind of captivated by it, but they're not trying to understand the underpinnings. They're just maybe going, hey, I don't understand it. I just want this picture.
Yeah.
Fair enough, but I mean, doing
Wild
the work
stuff.
that you've done with,
Yeah.
I call it ICRA or ICCRA, I think is super important too, because you need to be able to go, did this happen before? Do we know these? What, to be able to cross-reference. That's why he always says, I love data, because you can tell a lot from data. That's how you get pictures and whole stories out of things from going, these match up, that doesn't match up, and how do I want to cross-reference this?
Yeah, so you guys have seen, some of my archaeology presentations. I try to be as thorough as possible.
Yeah.
I'm
Thorough.
very much a stickler on
Thorough.
the details.
That's quite an
you know,
understatement.
And so we applied the same kind of methodology to this.
And thorough.
If Jeff were a wrestler of archaeological history, he'd be Jeff the Kitchen Sink Wilson. Because he does not miss a single item.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I
mean,
try to cover
as much as possible.
But if you don't, you'll add it later.
Yeah.
This has been awesome, Jeff. I would first of all love to, have you send us out. This is your event. We appreciate you hosting us and allowing us to come out here. Is there anything
Very much
that
so.
you want to leave everyone with?
Well,
Talk just a
did
little
you guys
bit more.
decide, are we going to do a longer version of this for the anniversary in August?
So I think for the anniversary, we're thinking about doing actually a mini doc project, because I think it might be, you had talked about some of the guys that we could potentially interview. So instead of getting all those folks in for a podcast episode, maybe we just go out and interview all them and get their story. Round town UFO researchers and the other gentleman that you talked about as well. So keep an eye out for that. We might have a project coming with Jeff. August 24th is the 20th anniversary. So
Yeah, 24th.
24th. So it's coming right around the corner. But we're going to do something regarding the Serpent Mound Crop Circle in a little bit more depth.
We certainly didn't answer all your questions, but we can really go.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think
we'll go in deep.
We're going to dig into some of those for sure. But like I said, I think
story,
we'll have you back in.
We've really, honestly, just in this short period of time with these 15 slides, are really scratching just the surface. It gets way more mysterious and way deeper than that.
We're going to need to get a campfire tonight.
It's already blown.
We're going to need to do a campfire podcast later.
Yeah, I mean, this has been great. All of you, thank you guys so much for hanging out with us.
Thank you for entertaining us and hanging out with us.
This is awesome. Thank you. This is the first live podcast we've ever done. Jeff, if there's anything you want to leave us with, let us know about where we can find Friends of the Serpent Mound.
Sure.
And
so Friends of Serpent Mound is serpentmound.org. If you're interested in this crop circle stuff, that's ICCRA.org. And so you can find that material in either place.
Cool.
And the Facebook group, the Friends of the Serpent
Mound
Mound.
on Facebook, you can find us there.
There's always a lot of conversation, chats, comments, articles, links, posts, so any kind of information.
For the audience that's here, stick around. We have some music following this podcast, so we'll take a break and set this up.
The great and powerful Terry Rivera.
Yes, Terry Rivera in the back. She's here.
She's the grandmother of Serpent Mound Star Knowledge. We've done a lot of projects with her and her husband Tom. So it's great to see her.
Is our first musical guest today going to return to Chris? Are you coming up
Chris
too?
Davis.
All right, Chris Davis is coming back. All right. So
all right.
Stick around for that music and enjoy. Please, walk around, visit the vendors, because they're the ones that pay for all of this. So if you support what we're doing up here, please support them out there. And
absolutely.
Strange Road also is one of our sponsors here. You can see some of the sponsors here for the event. So thank you very much, guys.
Yeah,
thank
absolutely,
you.
And happy to be one. If you guys want to follow us, we're at The Strange Road on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. We have a Facebook group as well, The Strange Road Hitchhikers. Please do reach out. Come and say hi to us.
We have some stickers. That's about all of our swag.
We're going to be helping Terry out with the music and Chris and all them with the music, but we're going to be around and we can hang out and chat. If you guys want to come say hi, please do. Check us out on YouTube. It's an audio and video podcast, and we do a lot of live streaming and other events as well. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you
guys
again.
rule. Take care. We're out.